Okay, good evening and welcome to Altamont Zoning Board of Appeals, regular meeting of February 25th, 2025. At this time, would you be so kind as to stand with me and lead the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This time for attendance, introduce the board. Everybody, would you introduce yourself? Charles, would you start up?
Charles Trout.
Lori Penzi.
Simon Litton.
Attorney Hyde Clark.
James Sullivan.
Bob Freeman.
Andrea is not in this evening. She called in to be excused. And I am your chair, Danny Ramirez. First on the agenda for discussion is CMM Fox Living Solutions, LLC, for the major subdivision property at SBL 37.14-3-6.1 regarding the status update on the resolution conditions and consideration of final approval.
Let the applicant go first. You have the applicant come up and- yeah.
Troy Miller, would you be so kind as to,
Or attorney, yeah.
or? You can take it easy.
Hi, everybody. So my name is George Slingerland. I'm an attorney for CM Fox Living Solutions. We'll try to keep it efficient. I think that, first of all, Troy wanted me to express his thanks. It's been a long road. It's a lot of time and effort for all of you. And it's a thankless job, so he wanted me to express his thanks to you guys. So thank you. Hyde and I have had a lot of conversations recently, and I think that we've pretty much narrowed down the outstanding issues to just a few, and we appreciate that. So I wanted to talk about where I think we are with those, and if you have any questions, obviously, please ask. So the first one is the sidewalk. Voluntary contribution for the sidewalk. In the preliminary approval, I think there was a note that it was going to be due before final approval. We had asked for that to be amended so that it was due before the first building permit application. The second item was the parks and playgrounds. Initially, in the preliminary approval, parks and playgrounds was due as a lump sum. It was a per lot fee, but due as a lump sum, again, prior to final approval. We had asked for that to be amended to each of those individually due at application for each building permit. So switching it from lump sum before final approval to per lot paid at each building permit. And then the last part, I believe, and Hyde, correct me if I'm wrong, the performance escrow. I think when Hyde and I talked and we looked and Troy got his performance bond, we thought that there was a lot of overlap in the performance escrow with the larger site work that was being bonded. So one of the things I want the board to consider is the applicant, Troy, who is not only the applicant here, but also an upstanding citizen of this village. We've done projects very similar before, saw it all the way through. So Troy's, his top priority item is to make sure that he does, he considers this his home. It is his home. He wants to do what is supposed to be done. So with that consideration, it seems like the biggest concern perhaps with the performance escrow might be related to stormwater management and specifically the rain gardens. So as Hyde and I spoke back and forth, I think what we proposed, the performance escrow for the rain gardens and for stormwater, it's difficult to know what to do for those because the rain gardens are very specific to the home that's being built. My understanding is that depending on size and location, that is going to determine how and where and how large and what, where it's to be located. So what we had talked about is instead of coming up with a number that we don't really know what we're basing it off of, let us get through 2 construction cycles. Let us get 2 lots sold. Let Troy design the property so we can figure out what those rain gardens look like for those first 2 projects. And then we'll use the cost of those 2 to determine the remainder of what should be bound under a performance escrow. So that's what we're thinking about and proposing as far as performance escrow goes. And then Haida, was there anything else? I had, so the lot line adjustments, I think we're all set. We've got signed documents on those. I think that was, looking back at the minutes from the last meeting, I think that was mentioned. So we have those under control. There's no worry for us there.
Yeah, so the deeds have been reviewed and approved for the lot line adjustments, and then the maintenance agreements have also been reviewed and approved to be satisfactory. So those were the 2 open items. Just for the record, going back to the request of the timing of the payments, we did review previous applications from village minutes and with the mayor and determined that it would be consistent to change the timing of those payments to prior to building permit. And both with the lump sum payment for the sidewalk before the first building permit, and then per lot for the parks and playground payment that is consistent with other applications in the village. In terms of the performance escrow, I did just want to note for the record the items that are covered by the bond. So again, we have 2 securities here. We have the performance bond that's in place right now. And then we have the performance escrow. So with the performance bond that's in place, what's covered is erosion and sediment control, topsoil, excavation, clearing, all the sanitary sewer work, water system work, storm system work, which includes some of the chambers and associated piping, as well as the vegetative swales and grading, which was a big part of the mitigation that we discussed. Includes sub-base work, binder course, and final restoration of the site. And so, as part of the discussion with the applicant's attorney, just felt that a lot of the items that initially we wanted to see covered under that performance escrow were in fact included in the bond that's in place. So just keep that in mind as part of our discussion as what we would want to see covered in that escrow. But it is my opinion that it's important to have that escrow in place after we get into construction, because again, that performance escrow is going to be in place for a year after the final home is built. So not necessarily an impact to need that right now, and would be more appropriate at the building permit phase. So the board has questions on any of George's comments?
Any questions, the applicant on his comments? I have none. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for the board, what I did was prepare a draft resolution, which Danny will read the introduction, and then we'll go through each condition and can have a discussion and mark it up as needed. So Danny, if you want to start the draft resolution.
Sure. Resolution for the final major subdivision approval. Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Village of Altamont received an application for CM Fox Living Solutions LLC for an 11-lot subdivision and related lot line adjustments, an area variance relief from the minimum frontage requirement for a keyhole lot. And whereas the ZBA issued a negative declaration on August 22nd, 2023, a copy of that resolution, Part 3 of the SECRA form and reasoned elaboration supporting the negative declaration are hereby incorporated by reference. And whereas thereafter, the ZBA approved the variance relief to permit 4 keyhole lots with approximately 16 feet of road frontage frontage each on August 22nd, 2023. That resolution is hereby incorporated by reference. And whereas the ZBA issued preliminary plat approval by resolution dated July 23rd, 2024, a copy of which is hereby incorporated by reference. And whereas the applicant requested a 90-day extension of the approval by letter dated January 15th, 2025, which extension was granted by the ZBA on January 28th, 2025. And whereas the applicant has addressed the majority of the conditions from the preliminary plat approval, has not made substantial changes to preliminary plat, but has requested some amendments to the timing of some of the conditions. Now, therefore, be it resolved as follows by the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Altamont, Albany County, New York. 1, the ZBA has considered the standards for major subdivision contained in the Village of Altamont subdivision law, Chapter 315, and hereby adopts the determination and findings annexed hereto. 2, the ZBA reaffirms the secret determination of negative declaration made on August 22nd, 2023. The requested changes to the conditions of the preliminary plat approval do not raise the potential for any new or different impacts that were not previously identified or reviewed as part of SECRA, and which would otherwise require an amended SECRA determination. 3, the ZBA does hereby grant final plat approval with incorporated lot line adjustments, subject to the following conditions, which are either satisfied or hereby amended as noted.
All right, so we'll just go through condition by condition. I'm not going to read the full condition if there's no changes. Condition A dealt with dredging. This condition has been satisfied. Condition B dealt with screening. This condition has been satisfied. Condition C, design standards. The required note has been added, and this condition remains for each new home, in addition to the required lot features and rain garden sizing, which remains a condition at time of building permit. D is the parks and playgrounds, timing of the required payment of $1,500 per lot. The proposed change based on the applicant's request is that that payment be made prior to each building permit being issued for each lot. Since this is a change, if there's any discussion from the board, we can have that at this point.
Board members, any concerns, any additional considerations or changes that you might think of?
All right, hearing none, we'll continue. Letter E is the voluntary contribution to sidewalk fund. The proposed amended, as noted, is that the lump sum $18,500 payment be made prior to the first building permit being issued. If there's any comments, we'll take those now. All right. F is the improvements to be completed or bond filed. We have identified the improvements that have not been completed, which I did read into the record, and the bond is in place. This condition has been satisfied. G is the performance escrow that we just discussed. I'll read this one in its entirety. In order to ensure that infrastructure improvements perform to the expectations of the village, a performance escrow shall be established to comply with the requirements of Section 7730 of the village law, in which shall be satisfactory to the village board as to form, sufficiency, and manner of execution. Said security shall remain in effect for a period of 1 year from complete development of the subdivision. This is the amendment. After 2 homes have been constructed, the applicant shall provide a written estimate to the village code enforcement officer of the average cost of installation of the rain gardens. The average cost will then be multiplied by the number of approved lots, which will be the total amount of the performance escrow. The form of the performance escrow shall be at the discretion of the village board, which may be a cash, bond, or letter of credit. The performance escrow must be established prior to building permit being issued for the third home. So we'll take any comments from the board at this point on that condition.
I just have just a point of information here. So the performance escrow is the cost of constructing the rain gardens and the wetland stuff.
The infrastructure, the
That-
waistlines,
Yeah,
the sewer and.
Well, so,
Injection pumps?
yeah, so it's proposed to be limited to the rain gardens based on the performance bond. So the performance bond is covering that the swales will be constructed, that the retention will be constructed, that landscaping grading will be done. So because that performance bond covers those items, but not the rain gardens, we have drafted it to limit that performance escrow to the rain gardens. But if anyone has any specific questions or comments that they'd like to see additional things be included there.
so so what we're looking at is the construction of the rain gardens according to, like the standards DEC has.
Correct.
So if
Yeah.
they build that, then they've satisfied that condition.
And so part of that is making sure that we've projected that these rain gardens will do a level of mitigation for any potential stormwater. So to the extent they weren't constructed to those standards or weren't otherwise working correctly, it just gives us the ability to make sure that changes are made. So it's not that just a rain garden goes in, now we have a chance to make sure that the mitigation's actually working.
So if they build the rain gardens in accordance with the design specs that DEC has, and people experience flooding, and then, what happens?
So it would be codes, codes would have to evaluate if there's an issue with that design. I'm not sure yet. Yeah.
I just wonder how
Yeah.
open-ended this liability is for the applicant.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question.
I would say we have to come back to the table and the engineers get together and come up with a new plan or an alternate modification of the existing one
Well, I
to
would, yeah.
satisfy.
I mean, I would also allow the applicant or engineer to come up and offer any clarification of that if you had a thought.
So my understanding, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, that because that's it's a condition that's, an ongoing obligation for us to satisfy, as well as a site feature that's subject to initial design by Troy's engineer based on DEC requirements, based on size, orientation of the home, your surface area that it takes up, and then it's subject to review by the village designated engineer. So, I think that's pretty standard as far as what stormwater management generally is like. It's the same thing if the swales and berms aren't working the way that they intended. I mean, we've done this before, and we've been 100% successful based on engineers knowing what they're doing. So I don't have any comment because I don't know what would happen if they don't perform as expected. But I mean, at that point in time, you're going to have homeowners that are there under some obligation to maintain those things too. And Heidi actually talked about that a little bit today as well.
Yeah, I
don't-
mean, it's tough to tell like a
Yeah, well,
general
I used to work
open-ended,
for
but yeah.
DEC,
Yeah.
and we spent, 25, 30 years arguing with GE about their cleanup stuff. GE did actually more than they were initially, what they initially said they were gonna do. in their negotiations with EPA, and then people are coming back saying, well, it didn't really work, or it didn't work as well as we had hoped it would. And so, I mean, you can engineer something from, forever, but it isn't necessarily going to work. So how long does the village hold on to Troy's money before we say, here's your money back, we think you did a good job?
Yeah, so the condition as of right now is for that to remain in place until the final home is constructed.
Okay, so the
for up
final
to-
home is constructed.
And then they would be for
Right.
1 year. And that's
Okay.
that's from the subdivision law. That's not out of
Okay, all right.
nowhere, but.
So
yeah.
that's when it ends?
Yeah.
All right, fine, thanks.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all.
And at some point it becomes private, there are going to be homeowners
Yeah.
and neighbors and private parties involved, but,
Okay.
yep.
Great question, thank you.
Any other comments to that amendment? Good. All right, condition H, the lot line adjustment, this condition has been satisfied. Lot I, the maintenance agreement, the maintenance agreements have been reviewed and approved. The requirement to file and include a covenant in each deed remains. J, street addresses, this condition has been satisfied. K, escrow, this condition has been satisfied. L, the sewer connections, this condition has been satisfied. There's also a change to the details for the sump pump, which this condition has also been satisfied. M, grading inspection, the note has been added and the inspection remains a condition during construction. N, permits and approvals, this is an ongoing condition. Number 4, if there's no other comments, this resolution states the ZBA authorizes and requires the ZBA chairman and secretary and attorney to take the appropriate steps to effectuate this resolution, including any filing and distribution requirements. If there's no other comments, or the chairman could
Okay.
take a motion.
At this time, entertain a motion to approve the resolution for final major subdivision.
So moved.
With Simon and,
Sure, second.
okay.
So roll call, Board Member Sharp?
In favor?
Board Member Smith?
In favor.
Board Member Living?
In favor?
Board Member Sullivan?
In favor?
Board Member Freeman?
In favor.
And Chairperson Romero?
In favor.
All right. So it's granted, and we'll just need the final maps to be signed.
Thank you and good luck. Second on our agenda is discussion of special use permit application from 120 Park LLC, Jeff Thomas, for the property at 120 Park Street, Altamont, New York. Tax map 48.06-4-4 and 37-18-6-3 for discussion only.
And before the applicant comes up, just to provide context to the board, so the applicant had submitted a code interpretation request. The code officer had provided his written response, and then the applicant sent a second letter to codes asking for reconsideration, and there's been a second and final letter from the code officer. So at this point, in order to have an active matter before the board, we would either need a variance application or a request to review that code interpretation request. Given the time and the amount of communication back and forth, we did want to give the applicant an opportunity to come in for discussion only. So this board won't get into going back and forth on the matter, but if you want to provide an update of where you're at.
And thank you, members of the board, for hearing us this evening. We appreciate your time. My name is Mary Beth Slevin. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Really, what we were hoping to do this evening was to get some additional feedback from the board. We are preparing a response to the letter that we received from the code enforcement officer dated February 17th, so that it will include a formal application for certain variances. But what we still have been looking for is some clarification on what the board sees as important items that we need to make sure that we address in the context of those applications. For example, one of the items that would require a variance is the fact that the property is located in the flood overlay district. This is a transformational project. It includes multifamily housing, commercial aspects. It provides the opportunity for the post office to stay within the village, all of which are important components for the village's evolution, really as memorialized in its own comprehensive plan. Uses that are currently permitted within the flood overlay district are single-family homes, two-family homes, elderly housing. So what we're asking the board, if you can, to help us understand where you see we need to focus our comments and the application for the variance to make sure that the board is getting the information that it needs in order to consider a variance application from the flood overlay district. The same would really be applicable for the creek buffer, because we run into the same issue at that level. There is, the Bozeman Hill Creek runs within the property. It's currently developed, nearby the property, excuse me. The property is currently developed in a fashion that the development portions lie within the buffer. Disturbance has already happened on the property. So what we're looking for in this aspect as well is what's important to the board to make sure that we address when we submit the variance applications for your consideration. And I don't know if the board feels comfortable providing us that information, but that's what we were hoping to hear.
And Mary Beth, I guess if you could just go through, because the communications were all through to the code enforcement officer.
Okay.
So I think this board would benefit from going through the main points of kind of maybe the latest request and what relief would be required.
Sure.
Just to
And I
maybe-
apologize.
yeah.
I thought the board had copies of the correspondence. But, so there were five issues that were raised by the zoning enforcement officer. The first was whether the uses that are proposed are permitted within this property and within the zoning district. It's within the CBD zoning district, and the CBD zoning district, although it does not allow multifamily housing, it does allow apartments within a business as an accessory use. Curiously, although apartments as an accessory use is defined in the code in the context of a residential complement, it is not defined, although the term is used, apartment in a business use is not defined within the code. So we have a little bit of a shortcoming within the code itself in terms of what's permissible and what's not. So that's one of the issues that we will certainly be looking to kind of ferret out to see where it falls and what's needed in order for the project to proceed. The next issue was the fact that the property is located within the flood overlay district. A variance, area variance will be required in order for the project to go forward. And that's the issue that we are looking for, some context from the board in terms of what you see as important items that need to be addressed in any application to you. The third item was the creek buffer requirement. So the creek buffer requirement is a limitation on disturbance across the property based on a 100-foot buffer from the creek. There certainly is substantial disturbance that's already occurred within the property. There would probably have to be additional disturbance for the project to go forward. So in the same context, again, we are asking the board, if you're able, to provide us with some comments to help us focus our attention on an appropriate response and an appropriate application for a variance. The fourth item was a variance from non-compliant features. So to a certain extent, this is redundant. So the non-compliant features are the fact that, according to the zoning officer, the fact that the application requires a variance from the flood overlay district and also requires a variance from the creek setback. He also found that the project requires a parking variance, which we do disagree with. We've gone over the numbers for the parking a number of times, and we can go over that more carefully with the board if you want to hear that tonight. But we think that the calculations are, the calculations have been miscalculated with respect to that. So that brings us to the fifth item in the zoning enforcement officer's letter. And in that item, he decided that a variance from the parking requirements was required. And again, we disagree with that determination because we believe that, in fact, there is excess parking, not insufficient parking, that's proposed with the project. But we can go through those numbers. So those are the five components of the letter that we need to address with respect to an application to this board. And we're certainly prepared to do that, and we're in the process of doing that. But we were looking for, some preliminary feedback from the board for the project generally, and then specifically with the variances that'll be required, helping us to focus on the information that this board wants to see in its review of the applications.
So, when I look at the property, there seems to be two creeks that, when I look at the property, there seems to be two creeks that cross the property. One is bigger than the other, and Simon has a map, and he can probably tell us more about it. But one is maybe a seasonal one, and so are you talking about if you're looking at the property facing the railroad, are you talking about the creek that is on the right side? The one that currently goes under the building, right? Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
All right, if you have a presentation so the camera catches it, it would have to be by the microphone. Thank you.
Sorry, if you could just put it to the right of,
Where do we need?
Does that work? Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, where'd you say the other one was, Charles?
Isn't there another little drainage type creek to the left? Yeah, down in there. Yeah.
I have a map
Yeah.
from the state, but I think the question here, I think the question here is, when we talk about streams tributary to the Bozenkill, which is what the issue is, how is that defined? Does that include just the main stem, or does that also include lateral branches to that tributary? I don't know the answer to that. But if it does, then that other creek substantially subtracts from the, at least the non-variance developable area of the project.
And we could certainly,
And one other point that I'd like to make is that it would be really helpful, at least for me, to have these kinds of maps that are produced by your engineer in a as DWG files so that I can overlay those on top of other publicly available data in a GIS format. Is that possible?
We'll look into it.
Okay.
We'll certainly look into it.
All right, you made mention about the creek buffer requirement, 100 feet. What disturbance or disturbance has occurred already? Those are your words.
We're going to have to quantify that. We're just starting to do that analysis in terms of what's already done versus what's proposed. So I don't have those statistics for you, but we are working on evaluating that.
But the railroad goes over it right now, both creeks, both the tributary and the seasonal creek, both railroads go over it, right, tracks go over it.
Yeah, but that's not on your property.
No, it's not, but I'm just saying, any existing building that's there also goes over it.
Mr. Thomas, we'd like you on record.
Yeah.
Did you want to repeat what he said?
Sorry, I was listening. The existing building certainly has disturbed a portion of the site, as has the existing parking lot. But as I said, we will provide the board with the statistics on what the existing disturbance is on the property and what's proposed, so that you can evaluate that.
You have mentioned about non-compliant features that require you to seek variances.
That's, as I said, it's somewhat redundant, because the same items that we need to have variances from for the flood overlay district and for the creek buffer were identified as the non-compliant features as well. The third non-compliant feature was the need for a variance from parking, which, again, we disagree with the calculations for that, and we'll be happy to review all of that with the board at length as we move on.
Okay.
So those are the three non-compliant features that were identified in the letter.
And just to help the board, so the parking part of your application would be to ask the board to reverse that determination? Or
Reverse
would
it
be-
or interpret it differently, because
Yeah.
we think that there's just a misinterpretation of how the calculation should happen.
Yep. And then it would be variance relief for the other matters?
For the flood overlay and for the creek buffer, and then, to the extent that it's needed for the non-compliant feature, even though it's the same thing,
Yeah.
yes.
But for the actual use, would that be a variance request, or is the applicant considering asking to challenge the code officer's determination on that?
We're still evaluating how that will be addressed,
Okay.
so I don't have an answer for you on that one.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking from the extent the board can provide comments, if it's headed towards the variance relief, certainly, if it's a use variance, starting to have a discussion on those factors and
Sure.
the other uses and the uses that are permitted. And I think defining if any redevelopment could occur without requiring that area variance relief, is also going to be helpful for the board.
Yeah, we understand.
Yep.
What's the difference in the number of parking spaces between what you're proposing and what the code officer said you need? How many slots?
Just let me pull it out here.
We did provide a calculation that we can hand out to the board, if you don't mind.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
He said it was like 53.
Thanks.
The parking calculation is very simple. I mean, it's easy math. We have 5 different areas of, that have parking requirements. One's the post office, and it's based on customer space. It's 1 space per 200 square feet. Then we have mixed use commercial. There's 4,427 square feet at 1 space per 200 square feet. And you see how the math works out? So we're not sure. I mean, I've done a few of these, and our developer has as well, our builder, and so is our engineer. And the math is very simple, so I don't understand. We have a surplus of 13 spaces. So I don't know. I think he's rounding.
If it comes to a fraction of a space, it has to go
You
up to the
can
full.
round up
Yeah.
or down.
No, we
You
round
can
up.
round up.
I think what's happening is the residential units require 1.5 spaces per multifamily unit, which is in your code. And I believe it's being rounded up to 2 spaces per unit, and then the calculation is being performed.
Okay, we're
Which
looking-
is typically in what I've always done, it's, otherwise the code would say two spaces per unit, if that were the case. It wouldn't assume you round up before you even do the calculation. So I think that might be where the discrepancy is arising from the comments and the correspondence that I have seen.
But
So one of the controversial aspects is the traffic pattern in front of the library. Is that currently, if all these other things are met, is that currently compliant with the current zoning or?
I don't know that that would be affected by the zoning. We are proposing a one-way traffic pattern, and we're open to discussions on which way the town would like to see that, rather than having crisscross, traffic basically going back and forth in both directions. But it really doesn't, there isn't a specific code that would preclude that or include that.
May I? You're not using the access area for the library as a go-through to the post office? Because that's going to be blocked off, I'm sure. That's not a public access road, it's for the, you want to respond to that?
Well, you're talking about where the library is now?
Yes.
Yeah, this property's always had an easement through there to go through. And, for instance, like the electrical fill station, that's actually on our property. We let the town use it, the village use it, but this is the only way the fire extinguisher company accesses through the library space, the library road. It's a dual road. It was made at one time that both, the property was owned by one entity. And the entity gave in order to sell this property separately, there's an easement that goes through the property. Correct? So this property has an easement through, but we have 3 access points. We have two on Park Street and one on Main Street. So there's a lot of access points. Right now, we're adding a post office that's bigger. I don't really see it being used by any more people. I don't think anybody more is going to come. I think it's the same amount of people, so we're not adding traffic that way. During the events in the village, we allow, there's a big field here, and we allow parking in there. People ride through and do parking for the village events now. Back there, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen it?
I know what you're talking.
Yeah.
During the construction, what access points would be used? Would the road in front of the library be used for construction vehicles?
No.
Okay.
I think we should clarify one statement you just made, though. I agree with you that you're not going to be adding volume to the library, but we are 100% going to be redirecting the current volume through the library parking lot.
Right, and one of the things is, I mean, Don, you can talk a little bit about this access here. We've talked a lot about it, but it's kind of nice to be able to drive through and walk to the library, to the post office. It's a one-way traffic. It's not gonna, it's just a nice walkable, drivable, people can drive around. There's a lot more parking. I mean, we could barricade this off. Our engineer tightened the space with a tree and a kind of a boulevard to narrow the space so nobody drives fast. It's a technique that's used instead of speed bumps or whatever. So, I mean, that could be blocked off, but I think we'd be it would be less of a project if we did that.
If you didn't have that access by the library, would that preclude the development of the project?
No.
So you could go ahead with the project, you could put in the additional apartments, you could put in a new post office, and you could spare the library the through traffic in front of it. You could do that.
We could do that.
I think the safety concerns about the increased traffic patterns are the biggest obstacle. However these variance issues get sorted out through interpretation of the law and conversations, I think the safety, the library is the first place I let my kids walk by themselves, And knowing that there's more volume going through there, it definitely pulls on the heartstrings.
What do they call those barriers that they knock down for?
Yeah, we could do breakaway gate. or-
Do breakaway gates for fire
For
department?
fire access.
Fire access.
I think that, having fire access would be good on both parts. If something, occurred, actually, if an accident occurred at the library entrance, now people at the library would have the ability to, exit the site by, dropping that barrier, opening that up as well. So
Well, I think that's a good point, though. I think one of the concerns is that all of a sudden, all of Park Street is gonna start going that way, which I see where you've got.
Well, the Park Street can't go that way.
Well, no, I'm just saying, rather than everybody coming off the hill or coming from that direction, just gonna start shooting through there
I
rather than
see.
just going down and up.
Yeah.
So the breakaway, and, I know what you're saying too, but at least there should be some kind of access for fire department
Well, we could
or
have-
any of that.
we could have
That
the-
should be there,
We
for
could
sure.
leave the ability to try it and put the access to
Yeah.
breakaway in if it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that's really the only question, it's just everybody just goes, rather than just take a little extra time and go that way, and they're gonna be bombing through there. So, but for fire purposes and emergency purposes, yeah, you would wanna definitely have some kind of opening to be able to go through there. Just my guess.
If there's any other thoughts from the board, we would welcome any comment. Again, we're working on our submission and response to the correspondence that we received from the zoning enforcement officer, so we have a little bit of time to put that together, but we want to make sure that, if there's critical issues that this board needs to make sure that are addressed, such as traffic, we make sure that that's part of the application and discuss it.
Yeah.
Might I interject that, would you point out, to make sure everybody's aware of it, the parking area that's next to the post office right now that they use, they lease, that is not owned and not being developed by you? Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, that's under separate ownership.
You want to see an actual picture of it?
No, just so that, it's on record, so that the public really knows.
Yeah.
Because I just heard about it,
Understood.
yeah.
And of course, that's not included in any of our parking counts.
No parking, right, okay, yeah.
So that would just wind up just being vacant.
We have no control over it.
Yeah.
I believe the post office, has
Okay.
a lease
So
for a
that-
certain amount of time with it.
So this is part of it. It's a long stretch in here that goes up to the library to where the solar fill
I
station is.
thought, okay, all right. I
So they
was-
double park in here, which is, fine with me.
Yeah.
Always down here. But these are the before, that's the building, what it looks like now.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
disturbances too. This is the building that's over the creek that you were talking about earlier, the tributary. The train tracks do go over it. It has ledge rock, Helderberg ledge rock in there. It's beautiful, barrier they were built on it. And the original train depot in 1867, I believe, spanned that as well. That's why they built it. But it was built really solid so it could handle a railroad going over it.
Yeah, there's definitely a weight issue for that, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you say you were going to point out the parking area that's
I
not
did.
included in the construction.
That's not included in the construction?
You don't own it,
That's the
right?
adjacent property owners.
Yeah.
On the picture
one-
there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On this,
No,
Yeah.
you
On
said,
that picture.
on that one, the one you're holding.
That's not included in the construction.
Yeah, I don't
It's
think
not
it is.
sold.
Oh, I'm
Over in
sorry.
that
I'm
area.
sorry.
This area
It's
here.
this
Yeah,
area right here.
yeah.
So the post office has a lease on that,
Okay.
and, they plan on keeping the lease going, so we'll have a lot, there'll be a lot of parking if they do. The lease is up in 2027, so we don't know where it's gonna go. I mean, it could go, we didn't use it for any calculations.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Any other questions, concerns? I have a question that might be able to answer. In the CBD district, I'm not aware of any, well, that I can learn, of any mixed use, where you have commercial as well as residential.
The interesting thing is that there's really no place in the village that specifically allows mixed use. So there isn't a single zone that allows it, yet it's very specifically called for under the village's comprehensive plan. So it's one of the issues that we need to work through in terms of how do we reconcile the aspirational aspects of the comprehensive plan, but the existing literal aspects of the zoning ordinance. And, how that's going to be addressed is something that we're still working on.
Thank you.
But in your zoning law, in your book, you have a schedule attachment. It's called Village Use Schedule. And right under CBD, it says apartments and business allowed. That's what I used that's why we're interested in this property. And the other thing is, I own 2 properties across the street on Main Street, and they're all mixed use. And the comprehensive plan, and when we were developing that years ago, it seemed like all the residents wanted mixed use. When you go to Guilderland, when you go to Malta, when you go to Saratoga, they all want mixed use. They don't want just commercial in one building. They want residential, they want customers. They want a walkable community. So, and I think that's what your comprehensive plan wants. And I really don't know how to read this. I mean, how can you say that, this is your, I only have one copy of it. But that's the schedule in the zoning.
As I said earlier, the apartments as an accessory use in the residential areas is very specifically addressed within the zoning code. The reference to apartments in a business area as an accessory use isn't defined. So it's just an aspect that isn't complete.
Has to be clarified.
So, just like the mixed-use aspect, it's not contemplated in the zoning code, but it's absolutely contemplated in the comprehensive plan. Same thing for apartments in, as an accessory to a business use. It's contemplated, but then how it's to be applied is not defined within the code. So there's just these deficiencies, and I don't want to call them deficiencies, but they're just not there. So those are the things that we need to work through.
Mr.
Have you-
Chairman,
Thank you.
you mentioned you wanted to know if there was any in the central business district mixed use. There is. There's the Park House Apartments. There's the Maple and Main where the restaurant is. Those are
Could you
Maple.
speak into the
I'm sorry.
phone so that we can?
So you wanted to know where mixed use was in the central business district. I own two buildings that have mixed use. One of them is the Park House Apartments. We have the spinning room and eight apartments. Next one is Farm Tap and Tavern. We have Farm Tap and Tavern and 3 apartments. And I think the same thing goes with the cafe. They have the cafe and they have several apartments in there as well. And that's all in the central business district.
Just back to the point about the zoning law not matching the comprehensive plan, has the applicant considered petitioning the village board if you feel that there's a legislative deficiency, just knowing that?
Yes,
Ms. Gordon?
again, how that's going to be addressed is something that we're still working through.
Okay.
I'll add that there is a committee that's currently revising the village's comprehensive plan, and that we can bring that up to the committee.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board that you would like us to consider?
I don't have any more. Chuck, Laurie? Jane? Freeman?
I'm satisfied.
Yeah, obviously, there's going to be a lot more discussion on the project, but we appreciate your time. We appreciate you giving us an opportunity to discuss this evening and look forward to moving the project forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
I'd really like to see the DWG files, so that we can map that stuff out.
I get that.
All right.
I have it. Thank you.
Just, how should I get them to you?
If you send them to the village,
Okay,
Ginger.
Ginger?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Secretary Ginger Hanna?
Okay, great. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Board members, a review and approval of minutes from the ZBA meeting dated January 28th, 2025. Any corrections?
Nope.
There's a typo with Walrus Surveying on the first page. It says Walworth rather than Walrath.
Where was that, Charles?
Page 1 toward the bottom, it says Walworth rather than Walrath.
Just under Rose name. Yep, right there.
Walworth? Did you misspell it?
Yeah.
The
yeah.
correct spelling is on the last page.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry, but
Okay. Walworth is misspelled on page 1. Uh, 2025, the date of the,
Oh, yeah. I didn't see that.
gets bad when you put 19 something, you know, but, you know. That's the only thing I caught. Any other corrections to the minute? Hearing no corrections, entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second. And that was James? Okay. So we'll, Board Member Trout,
In favor.
Board Member Freeman? In favor. Board Member Freeman?
In favor.
Board Member Sullivan,
In favor?
Board Member Freeman,
In favor.
Chairperson Romero.
In favor.
Great, thank you.
Other than that, motion to adjourn?
So motioned.
Second. Roll call, Board Member Trout,
In favor.
Board Member Pinn,
In favor.
Board Member Litton,
In favor.
Board Member Sullivan,
In favor?
Board Member Freeman,
In favor.
Chairperson Romero.
In favor. Thank you. Thank you.
That wasn't too bad.